Welcome to episode number 4 of the Veto. We took a couple weeks break, but we're back. We're sitting pretty, and we're just going to fly quickly through Katowice because we did Katowice predictions just before the playoffs, and I'm pretty sure we got 0 of the playoff predictions correct. So that was fantastic to come off the back of that one. So let's just fly straight into this one. We won't stay on this too long, but I guess the big topic was just Gambit in the first place. We wrote them off pretty much in that first game of the playoffs against Na'Vi, and then even in a Spirit matchup, I think I probably would have still taken Spirit going into that one, and then of course going into the grand final, given that the team on the other side of the brackets was probably going to have to be one of the best teams in the world at that point in the tournament. All the way, I probably would have bet against them, but they did it in the end. Players like Shiro having a great event as well. So just tell me what went right for Gambit and what was so terribly wrong about our predictions going into the playoffs.
Well, CIS and online CS.
Exactly.
Need I say any more? I think it was like the third thing Hobbit brought up in his post-interview after winning fucking Katowice. He's like, wait until we get back to LAN and then start seriously judging us. It just...
He's already downplaying himself.
It was just brutal, man. It was so strange watching it because you're watching this team who you've written off and you know individually aren't on the same level just step up. It was... I almost started wondering if teams were playing down to them just because they were getting dragged into that CIS style of mental CS, but it didn't even seem like that, right? They took 2-0s against fucking Na'Vi, 2-0 against Spirit, and then VP only managed to take a map off them. Like, it's utterly ridiculous that they managed it. Obviously, all props to them. They looked insane, for want of a better word. They just played incredibly good CS across the board. Everybody looked solid all event. And the thing is with online CS is that's all you really need, right? If 5 players turn up consistently for a whole tournament, you're going to win the fucking thing no matter what opposition you're coming up against, especially because, I mean, we've talked about it before. The top 20 at this point is the most competitive it's ever been. Online CS really does level the playing field. It gives these players opportunities. They're in the comfort of their own homes, yada, yada, yada. We talk about it all the time. But basically, if all 5 of you show up, you are just going to bang your way through a tournament. And that's exactly what Gambit did.
Well, there you have it. So, Gambit, it was a bit of an odd one, wasn't it? When they, because I was even watching their games. I was like, yeah, this is it. They're going to get found out in this game. Obviously, playing against Na'Vi, even when they were up in that match, I thought, they're going to drop the ball at some point. They're going to get onto Na'Vi's good maps. It's going to be over. But every single step, they kept on going. Shiro, I mean, I don't know how many 1vx's he ended the tournament on. It was definitely above 15 or something. It was definitely in contention for the most ever in any tournament in history. So whatever happens to him when he's left alone, it's like he doesn't like his teammates or something. He just gets way better when they're all dead. It's like, for God's sake, they've all shut up now. Now I can, clutch this out. I can play by myself. This is like a pug, So maybe Shiro, thrives in that environment. But he was definitely I think he probably was the MVP of the whole tournament. But him and Dexter were like lights out the whole tournament. And from a whole AWPing perspective, Shiro's a player that probably excites me a lot more than a lot of the European AWPers of his kind of, obviously of his experience level. And we'll talk about some of these teams later that might want an AWPer, but it's unfortunate that I'm guessing Shiro doesn't have great English because they'd probably be buying him if he did have really good English. In terms of the way Gambit was playing, I didn't watch enough of the games to say anything that profound, but I know from watching a few of them and talking to other people, them and VP included to some extent, the way they play, they bring so many like little small things to the server, little setups, little plays, tiny tweaks on things you hadn't seen before. And obviously for teams that hadn't played them before, maybe this was very, very surprising. But as we know in the playoffs, that was the odd thing about this run from Gambit. They only beat CIS teams. So even the argument of, they're catching them off guard and all that bollocks, that kind of goes out the window. And they actually put out, a VP in very good form and Na'Vi, who I said were probably the best team in the world going into the playoffs. So good shit from them. And even though I said, I think in the December episode or one of the episodes that I thought at some point Gambit was going to have a good result, they're going to put in a good playoffs run, I didn't anticipate this, that's for sure. So I'm not going to take much credit. I thought they would, eventually take out a few top teams, but not actually run their way to the whole tournament and actually win the whole thing. So for them, online regardless, it's pretty crazy stuff. So good transition into the other kind of semi-shocker of the tournament, which was VP making the final after a bit of a rocky start against Na'Vi. all the way up to the final, they looked fucking sick. They had the playoff run where we were talking about their playoff bracket before they went into it. We were saying if they make the final and they win this shit, like holy cow, they're gonna have to beat some serious teams on the way. They beat Astralis, they beat Team Liquid, they get into the final, quite heavy favourites for my money by the time they got to the final. For they're in great form, and then it all goes flat. They had a best of 5, all the maps, and it just fell apart. So just VP overall, I'm guessing overall it was still a good tournament. Bit underwhelming in the final, but I don't know. Where is VP for you? Where will they be, going into future tournaments?
Top 5, I think, in the world is a perfectly decent argument for them at the moment. Honestly, when I look at how they ran through it, I think they got caught out by playing CS again, right? They've adjusted to playing Astralis, they've adjusted to playing Liquid, they've played EU, they've played NA, and then they've gone right back to what we all know is the region where you get the upsets, right? If CIS teams meet on a server, that's I'd say the most frequent upset territory, right? You see it in the qualifiers for majors all the time, the CIS qualies, you get random teams you never heard of stomping, top 10 teams in the world in CIS. So yeah, I mean, they looked very solid consistently across the whole thing. Obviously, it was a little while back now, so I can't remember the specifics, but they look like the team they've been building into being for about the last year now, and I think it was a really nice way. Unfortunately, obviously not winning it, that's always going to suck, but to say you took out Astralis, to say you took out Liquid, you've immediately put your name in lights for the next 6 months minimum, right? Everybody's going to be wanting to invite VP to their tournaments. Everyone's going to want to see VP there, and you can't ask more than that.
Yeah, I agree. I think from the invites perspective, I know they're definitely playing in Pro League, and presumably they got a couple others coming up. But just for them, it's kind of my hope now that we get to see them at maybe not quite a Katowice level tournament, but at least a good tournament where they're playing, 4 or 5 top 10 teams every single month. We can really see this team put through their paces, playing all the top teams, different styles of teams. Because it just kind of feels like at the moment they had a good run of tournaments of like Flashpoint and Summit and DreamHack December, and then they had those events where there was 1 or 2 good teams in all of them, but they never really went for a whole run, and then they finally get to Katowice. They take out multiple top teams, and I want to see them in multiple tournaments like this where they have to really punch at a super high level throughout the whole tournament. They have to average a mega high level to make it to this sort of placing in the final. So hopefully they do get invites a bit in the future. In terms of how they were playing at this tournament, I thought their T sides were fucking incredible in this tournament. Yakindar, he might have a bit of development to go, but when he's in the right spots, when he's going in with the right util, when he's given the right space on T side, this guy can open up parts of the map. Yep. Certainly on par with anybody in the world right now. And of course it might be online, and maybe on LAN it'd be a bit different, especially for him when he might need a few lands of adjustment or just getting used to the pressure. But in terms of a hot prospect, in terms of what he can give that team when they put him in the right positions, Jesus Christ, have they found this guy? What a find with Yakindar. Of course the Astralis and Liquid games are brilliant. Final wasn't great, and in that final I think they got exposed for their CT sides not being quite there yet. Maybe they need to work on some fundamentals on the CT side, maybe they need to work on communication. I don't know exactly what the problem is. It tends to be on T side. You can just sort of dictate the pace a bit more. You just sort of, we're grouping on this side, we're hitting this, we're sending Yakindar out here to force the first fights. Maybe on the CT side because they can't do this sort of thing, because maybe if you give Yakindar too much space, you might give up entry frags and put your man down. Maybe that's where they're having some problems. So I hope we get to see more top level tournaments, because I want to see them even getting exposed in some of these areas again in future tournaments, and I want to see the good progression, because that's more interesting. That's a more compelling storyline to me than just teams winning or losing. Is the progression, is seeing the changes, seeing the development, especially for a team like them who obviously playing at this sort of caliber. It hasn't been that long for them. They probably learned a lot already, and they probably got a bit of progress they can still take in this direction. So that's VP. We thought we'd wrap up Katowice fairly quickly before we jumped. Talking about mostly teams in the kind of the Pro League groups at the moment. That's obviously Group A is finished, B is ongoing, and then C and D will be in the next couple of weeks. So the biggest story, I guess, from Group A was Heroic, who won the group. Did they win it without losing a game?
They dropped a couple maps, but yeah, they've not lost.
Yes, they didn't lose a series. It's a round robin series, best of 3 series group stages with 6 team groups. Didn't lose any of their games, and the first thing I think we should talk about is actually the roster changes they had. So just before, I think it was just after Katowice, so between these two tournaments, NiKo and AWPing come out. That's the Danish NiKo, not Bosnian. They come out, and then Shush and Refresh come in from Mad Lions. Potentially some players that weren't on, let's say, the average viewer's radar so much, but for someone like me who's especially seen the Mad Lions at Flashpoint, I think these were good pickups. And obviously in this tournament, at least in the group stages, what more could you ask for from these two players? So talk me through this change. Did Heroic need a change? Were these the right players out and in? And then I guess already starting now to reflect on what it looks like pretty positive change already, doesn't it, for Mad Lions?
Yeah. I mean, did they need it? Maybe not. They could have made the argument either way. They've been beating some decent teams regardless. It was one of those changes where you sort of looked at it initially when it came out and you went, what? Why have you done that? You know, as much as they were middle tabling it, they weren't awful. They weren't great. You could see a world where you keep the same 5, you go home, you work on it, and maybe you come back a different team. Maybe you look much stronger. But clearly, they'd done their homework, they'd done their research, and they knew exactly what they needed to just light a spark under this Heroic team, right? Because their whole Pro League run has just been nuts. Cadian has been on the kind of form he hasn't been on in years. He's just consistently banging people out with the AWP, and it's giving that platform for everyone to work around. And then you bring in someone like Refresh, who has always been the story of he has the talent, he has the potential, and it's just never quite happened, right? It never quite happened on Optic. He obviously didn't really have any fucking time on Mad Lions. Let's be real, he was there for a little bit and then he's gone again. But now he's come to this Heroic roster. Clearly, they have a lot of faith in him. Clearly, they have a lot of faith in him being that star player and the key part of the system when Cadian maybe isn't absolutely banging with the AWP, and it's working. He's putting up fantastic numbers. He's joined up there by Shush. Everything looks incredibly solid for Heroic. And what impressed me most of all, because it's easy to win those games when you're smashing people, right? When Refresh is top of the scoreboard, when Shush is up there, when Cadian's banging on the ult, and you're just shredding people, those are easy games to win. It's the grindy ones that beat new teams. When you've got 2 new players in your roster and you get into a battle of 4 spies, you're buying shit guns all the time, you keep getting found out by a T side who've got better economy, better weapons, better utility than you. It is so easy to get into that hole and just go, fuck this. You know, we're getting destroyed on this map. We've just joined this roster. This is a write-off. Let's just go and do, you know, my own thing. Let's go and make my stats look as good as possible. Let's just mentally check out, right? There's lots of ways to phrase it, but mentally just check out from the game. They did not do that. And there was consistently periods. I mean, I look at the Complexity game specifically, because even though Complexity had a pretty meh tournament by my standards for them, they still looked pretty solid. 16-12, 16-10, 16-14. None of those maps are washouts. None of those maps are easy to get on the board, including 9 T-side rounds on Train for Heroic, which is just ridiculous. They were grinding out the victories, and that's the thing I wanted to see from them more than anything else, was just that ability, that mental fortitude almost immediately to go and get the shit wins, because that is something I think is really undervalued in CS, is just the ability to go out there, and when you're playing like crap, when you're not hitting your shots, when you're not hitting those flare moments and, you know, getting the highlights on HLTV, still to just grind out and win fucking games. And that's what Heroic did at times.
Yeah, I think with Heroic, what I'm guessing happened internally was something along the lines of, at times last year, especially winning Cologne, this sort of period, they looked like a team that was, at least in the online era, solidly top 5, maybe even slightly higher, especially when teams like Astralis and at that sort of time, Vitality wouldn't have been quite at their peak and this sort of thing. So, and Na'Vi as well for that matter. So during this period, they probably thought, okay, we are a top 5 team, and now we've got to look beyond and now start really consistently winning tournaments or consistently being top 4. And then obviously for Heroic, since then, it's been a slow and gradual drop off. Not massively. It's not like they just tanked everything and gone off the face of the earth. It's more like now we're slipping down the top 10. And I can imagine internally, this is a very frustrating thing to be happening for them, where it felt like, you know, for a team of such young players, for a team that rose up so quickly after recent moves that got them into that kind of that good period in the summer, how could they not just keep getting better when their players are inexperienced? You know, they can learn a bit more, we can fill out our map pool, we can, you know, get over the Hunden ban and make some changes, all of these sort of things. So for them, from them internally, I'm guessing this is what they thought after the summer period. We've got a great basis now. We can only improve from here. And then they didn't really improve. Now, I would argue that they were never going to stay solidified at that really high level. I just didn't think they had the caliber of CS. And it also combined with a period when some of our top teams were not in the best shape. And as soon as the Navis of the world, the Astralises, even Complexity after some rocky periods got back online, then they're going to have a much tougher time staying at a top 5 to level, or potentially a top 3 level when they really peaked out. So that's what I kind of think happened internally. And then you get to this period when it must have been, I don't know, 4-ish months since they've had really mega results, something like this. And I'm guessing internally they just said, we were out of ideas. We tried everything strategically. We've tried everything with particularly players, I'm guessing like NiKo and AWPing, and we just need to make a change. And we're looking at Mad Lions. Refresh came back into Mad Lions. He had this big switch up of roles and he still maintained a really high level. Shush was the kind of the younger player, the unproven player. He still has some molding to go, but in terms of the spots they've got him, put him in where he's more of a role player and he plays the sides of the map on both sides. He anchors bomb sites. You know, he's a perfect fit for a team like Heroic where they are, you know, kind of in the world standings. So that's what I'm guessing. This isn't with any inside information. This is what I'm guessing. They felt like they had to make a change to try and push up to where they felt they could be. They brought in these players, and if I had to say the players they should have brought in, it might have been some of these sort of players. I mean, if you could have cracked a Valde and convinced him to come to a team like this, then maybe you go for a Valde. But outside of players like him or everyone's hanging around in free agency, these two were very, very good choices, and they certainly were very good on Mad Lions, and I think they were the best pieces probably on that Mad Lions team. A lot of people would have looked at Acor, but I would have said, yeah, Refresh is probably the best player on that team. Shush maybe doesn't always have the super high caliber performances, although at Flashpoint he was very, very good. You know, he's a role player, he plays his spots, he's young, you can mold him, you know, he'll do what you say, so he was a kind of a perfect fit. And in the end, I think this roster's come together very nicely, and obviously it all clicked immediately in this tournament. Kind of at least overall series wise, they wrecked everyone. Even if some maps were very close, they were getting all of them over the line. As you said, it's very impressive for a team with recent roster moves to be able to grind out games and have the mental fortitude and be able to retain, you know, the communication when it goes late, for Acadian calling with new players to not have big problems where you can't, you know, sometimes you might feel like you can't call what you want to call because you haven't gone through this stretch yet. So that's all very impressive. And I know from speaking a little bit to Refresh that him and Shush are definitely coming into this one like hyper motivated, like off the face of the earth. Obviously, Denmark probably is in a fairly significant lockdown at the moment, so I can imagine for them they can't really go out and do that much anyway. So why not just throw everything at this? You've got your chance in a very high caliber team, and they just got new backing, didn't they, from a Norwegian investment, they got bought up, I think, entirely by some Norwegians or something. So whatever's going on there, they probably have some decent money. So why not? You're in a top team now. You're already putting in some good results to just plow everything into it. And clearly, by the speed they've come online, you know, they must have been practicing like off their tits off pretty much so far. And from what I didn't watch all the games, but from watching them a bit in the server, they look kind of like a souped up version of the previous Heroic, which sounds a bit obvious, but it's kind of from what I've seen how they're playing. The strats on T side are good. CT side, they're bringing a bit more because they've got a player like Refresh who maybe wants to be a bit more proactive than a player like probably NiKo was playing his spots before. So CT side looks good. T side, they've always had the strats. So it's coming together really well at the moment. Question of honeymoon period or coming in unsighted. So maybe in the future they'll be a bit more difficult, but what could you really ask for in the first 2 weeks of a lineup? So I've been very impressed with them so far, and I look forward to seeing what a player like Refresh can do in the future when he's had potentially a rocky couple of years up to this period when he got in Mad Lions and now onto Heroic.
Yeah, it's worth pointing out as well that by getting that hero run, they skip the first 2 rounds of the
I've been meaning to look at
Pro League.
I
think it's the first 2. I think it's the first 2 rounds. So they've now got a fat break because they're Group A as well, right? So they got to wait for B, C, D, and then the play-ins, and then they'll be playing again. So, you know, we talk about honeymoon period. This is probably it. They've had their run, right? They've been with their new players. They've now got time to go away, to prep, to look at VODs and go, okay, we fucked up this, we fucked up this. Let's make this a bit better. You know, let's change how you play this angle slightly. Let's work on these positions. They've got the time to do it. I think they really are in pretty much the perfect spot at the moment. They've had their early run. They've now got, what is it? I'm doing math on broadcast. Never do math on freaking broadcast. 13 maps of footage to go through, a decent spread across the entire pool as well, to go through and do the reviews of these players playing in their system, right? Which is always critical. So yeah, I think Heroic, they've done fantastically and they've bought themselves a really great opportunity. Should we talk about a team who were shit in Big Clan?
Yes, please tell me.
Yeah.
Tell me Big Clan. So in this
man.
group stages, people haven't seen it. One series win, they lost 4, and were you casting them for the final game, the Renegades
I
game?
The Renegades
so
game, dude.
give us some insights. What was going? I think they're probably out anyway by that point. But what was going wrong for Big in that series? What did you see from the German boys?
I mean, you can sort of write it off as a wooden spoon game, and I saw some people doing it on Twitter as well. But I said before the game, and I stand by it, for Renegades to even take a map off of Big, considering they haven't won a single map so far in Pro League, right? Everyone had beaten them 2-0. It had been slaughter after slaughter after slaughter. They'd been close, they'd had opportunities, they'd been in the lead, and they had not learned how to shut it out. And I looked at it and I went, okay, Big should just wipe the floor with this. It should be a nice, easy 2-0. They build up a little bit of confidence. They get back into their groove a bit. And maybe we see a little bit more from them in the future, because this game means nothing. It was some of the scrappiest CS I've ever casted, ever watched. And that's going back to the Newell days. So that's really fucking throwing the boat out. But it was honestly the second map of Dust 2. I think we saw more Force Buys win than I have ever seen in this current meta. It was just constant. They'd have Deagles and a scout, and then Renegades would somehow pull off the impossible. And then Big would be back on Deagles and 1M4, and then they'd fucking win it out of nowhere. It was just constant back and forth and back and forth. And it felt like Big were playing down to Renegades a little bit. It felt like Big were falling into that trap of playing how Renegades wanted them to play and engaging in this scrappy, lots of one-on-ones across the map consistently. Renegades just prodding and poking at them, and Big were biting on everything they were given. But then again, nobody showed up, and this was honestly the biggest problem. Is I've said it before, I do feel like Big really rely on Searson, especially on maps like Inferno. Consistently they were posting him solo. Well, they actually at one point gave up on it and started posting Keto solo, and it looked like they had no idea what they were doing, because I think 2 or 3 rounds they posted Keto solo on site Inferno with an MP9 and no utility. And he was stuck new boxes with an SMG, no ability to get info, no utility to stall the hit at all. They've got a full 4-man A stack, and then of course Renegades just fucking executed B. And he's stuck there with an MP9, like, piss, I can't do anything. He gets one, he's traded out, the round's done. There's no way they're retaking it. So I don't know. It just felt like very disjointed across the board. Obviously, Xantares not having the greatest game to start things off, only 10 kills on an Inferno that goes to, overtime 19-15. That's never going to be pretty, but it really did feel like nobody stepped up. Tabson had a decent game. Searson had a decent game. Keto had a decent game. I'm looking at the stats. They look all right, but it just didn't click in the server at all. And it was very awkward to watch, because you could see flashes of what they were trying to do, of what they were trying to achieve. You could see flashes of the individuals coming through. I mean, Xantares pulled off some pretty nasty clutches with Deagles and M4s on Dust 2. But other than that, they just weren't there. And I mean, if you look over the entirety of Big's Pro League season, there is these flashes of them showing up and then disappearing again, right? When they take the map off of, I want to say OG, they take OG's map pick. That's great. Then they lose their own map pick. Then they get slaughtered on Inferno. Then you go to the Heroic game, and it's very much the same story. They take their map pick fantastically, 16-7 on Mirage, and you're thinking, okay, Big are back in the picture. Then they get slaughtered 16-10 on Vertigo, which used to be a pretty solid map for them. And then again, Complexity. They look great. And you watch it and you go, I was watching it in prep, and it's like they 16-12 Complexity on Mirage, and Complexity, as much as we talk about them having problems, they're really starting to work their Mirage out now. And 16-7 on Dust 2. And you're like, okay, fine. They've started to show up. They've got a map that they're good on. They know how to play Dust 2. They're smashing it on Dust 2. They pick Dust 2 into Renegades and they lose 16-13. They just played like a completely different caliber of team to what we know they are. I don't know. It was honestly, I mean, it made for a great cast. Don't get me wrong. It's a fucking great game. And I'm grateful to both of them because you looked at the game and you went, fuck, that's a 2-0 to Big. That's a goner. But I looked at it and I didn't immediately know what the fix was. It wasn't like I was looking at it and going, okay, if you change this player, you change this spot, it works. It just disjointed across the board, man.
Yeah, well, it's not actually just Pro League where they've had issues. In Katowice, I knew they went out fairly early. So in the full-on tournament, when he went into the full-on group stages, they placed last place, losing to Heroic, who obviously just made a change straight after the tournament. And they lost to G2, who just made a change straight after the tournament. And then actually in the play-ins, the only teams they beat were Movie Star Riders, who... they're not of a big caliber, and they beat MIBR, which is now whatever it was, Boom Esports. So who really cares? So pretty much it was just like a disastrous 2 tournaments for them overall. And I do question how much for them. They're definitely a team that likes to have good prep on teams going into matches. They're definitely a team that thrives off when they can have a good game plan going into it, and then they can run these set rounds, and we know they're going to play roughly this way. And it probably didn't help them a lot that basically every team in this group stage made roster changes, or the roster was in flux around this tournament, apart from it's actually only Complexity, I guess, that they could have prepped very well for, especially with Renegades, who've only played 2 games in Europe. And so they couldn't prep very well for any of these games. Obviously, the Renegades game, they were already eliminated, weren't they, by that point, I think. So you can say what you like about that stuff, but I mean, once you're in the server, I think you still play to win. So it's hard to just write it off completely. And regardless of the scenario, you should just be beating a Renegades as a team like Big. When
exactly.
I look at Big, and my initial kind of on paper look at this team is, okay, minimum top 8, good day top 5. If we're on to all cylinders, let's push for top 4, top 3 in the world. And slowly, again, this is a team that slowly progressed down. They're kind of a bit like the Heroic storyline, but where does the buck end with Big? Where does it become, if they have 2 more tournaments like this, do we question the roster? Do we have to pull out some of these players? We got to change the way they play a bit? Is giving Certain all this space not working? Is he, is there so much pressure on him that he can't play in these scenarios that when he feels like I have to get this entry frag, he goes overly aggressive and he gives it up? Or should we put more emphasis on other players? Should we stop playing so set round heavy on T side? Should we default more? There's loads of things it could be, and I'm not sure what the fix is, but certainly if they have 2 more tournaments like this, we're probably going to see a roster move coming out of this team. As sad as it is, because I do think the lineup at times last year was very, very good, and without COVID and all that rubbish, they could have definitely had some really good offline results. But for Big and kind of the expectations I have for this team, and just the eye test of looking how well they can play when they run their set rounds, I expect a lot more from Big than they showed here, and they should definitely be getting at this is sort of group that if you're a serious caliber team, if you've got serious depth, you've got a clear 6 map pool, you should just be cleaning up some of these teams. As good as Fun plus Phoenix or FPX or whatever has looked in some recent tournaments, they shouldn't be contending with a team that's punching for top 5 in the world. You shouldn't be losing to a Renegades that's had a lot of issues in all their other games, and clearly they're super rusty, having not played at top level CS for whatever it's been, 10 months, 9 months, or whatever. So it's a really disappointing result, and especially with this format isn't just you lose one game and you're out. It's not even a double elim best of 3. It's a round robin best of 3. How many chances do you want to win these games? So I was really disappointed by Big in this group stages, and there's really no excuses in my eyes for their performance here. It's not like they've been playing a bazillion games. They don't play in all the smaller tournaments. They had Katowice a few weeks break, plenty of prep. So I've got no excuses here for Big, and I was disappointed by their play, and I'm not sure where the problem is coming from. I suspect it's a perfect storm at the moment of not being able to prep for other teams, having issues running set rounds into teams when you haven't prepped against them. Maybe Certain is given too much space and he's not as well-rounded as people think he is, and some other problems. So I don't know. Do you think, how long would you give this lineup before you'd think about a roster change? Who would you even, that's the other problem with a team like this, is who would you even look at for other players? Because I don't really know of any. They do, to my knowledge, they communicate in English, so you have some options in that sense, but I'm imagining they want to stay down the German route, considering it's called Berlin International Gaming or whatever the actual org's called. So I don't know. Do they need changes? Who should they get?
It would be impossible, I think, without knowing the discussions going on internally, what to change, right? Because as we've said, there's like 4 or 5 or 6 things that you could point at and go, maybe that's the reason that they're not performing to the level that we expect from them. I think Xantares has looked pretty poor recently. I would maybe be looking in that direction. It feels mean because he is the odd one out in that team, right? You talk about Berlin International Gaming, the full German lineup. You know, he's committed to it. He's learning his languages. He's making it work. He didn't have great games, and a lot of the excuses that we've traditionally had for him in terms of ping and, you know, the situations like we've had with Woxic, they weren't there. I can't remember who tweeted out. I think it was one of the HLTV stats guys that they were one of the worst performing teams at Katowice who were playing out of a LAN setup.
Yeah.
Like they had the full 5 men in a room, you know, the best conditions we can have given circumstances. And when you look at all that and then the performances that they're putting out as a result, I don't know, man. It is such a dilemma, and I don't envy big management at all. The ones who are going to have to eventually make the call. I think 2 tournaments, as you said, 2 more shit tournaments, then I'm looking at this and I'm going, we need to change something. Something's got to give, right? Somebody's got to go. There's got to be a change in calling. There's got to be a change in strategy. You maybe take some of that aggression away from Searson and give space back to someone like Xantares. Something has to give sooner rather than later, because they've been on this downward slide since sort of start of February, so about 6 weeks now. And if you have 1 or 2 more tournaments where you're sliding down, that team is very soon going to become forgettable. And that's the last thing anyone wants.
Yeah, well, actually, even the result, presumably that's the Blast groups you're looking at where they had a good result. That one, even that it felt like a bit of an outlier to me compared with some of the other tournaments. So yeah, even it probably goes further back than that if you kind of put a through line through all of their results in terms of their coming off a top level. I did just think of a potential reason they might be having issues, and it's actually because they got rid of Toby as their coach, or Toby. I can't remember the exact reasoning. It was something like he stepped down for personal reasons or something. I'm pretty sure they would have kept him if they could have, and they brought in Dude, I think is his alias, and definitely Toby was someone over the course of last year where he was definitely one of the sleeper best coaches in the world. Same as the Vitality coach, these sort of people that nobody talks about, and then everything I read in interviews, everything I see on the server, anything I hear behind the scenes whilst working at a Flashpoint, for example, points towards this guy being seriously good, and nobody has a bad word to say about him, and he clearly has a massive work ethic, and he is a big part of their system. So because kind of talking to now where we see big right now, something I like to talk about is like I did have a good name for it, but I can't remember what it's called. Wait, give me a second. It's called fuck. It's so like I think I called it the in-game leader hunt. No, it was, I can't remember. I did have a really good name for it. I was gonna actually like Lurpus did some content on it, but I was gonna like write an article ages ago about this. But like the whole premise is that back in the day, it doesn't happen so much these days, but what would happen is you have a team that's almost really high level, and then they're like, this in-game leader here, he's not putting up the same frags as us, so they get rid of the in-game leader, they bring in a really great fragger, and then they just run the same strats for the next 2 tournaments, and they're absolutely sick for 2 tournaments, and they just confirmation bias the shit out of themselves, thinking this was the perfect move, like we've upgraded so much. And then when you get 3 months in and you're adding no new strats and nobody can actually call and you can't run the same stuff anymore, it just all goes to shit. And you saw this with loads of teams over 2014, 15, 16, and that's kind of what I think is happening here potentially with Big, where you get rid of Toby and immediately the effects aren't felt, because he still had his system he integrated, he still coached the players up to a high level. So you get a few months kind of off the back of it, off the momentum you were still building up. And after 2, 3, whatever it's been now, a couple of months of not having him, now they're really starting to feel it potentially. And maybe someone like Tabson is getting exposed for not being a super well-rounded in-game leader in terms of the overall game. Maybe in-game he can call a perfectly good game, but building a whole game plan, setting up a whole strategy, maybe he doesn't have it. And if they can actually turn around this slump and get back to super high level, that'd be very good proof that tabseN is a very high caliber in-game leader. But I'm looking at someone like tabseN. I'm looking at it's always hard to know what a coach does, but I think it is called Dude, isn't he? We're looking at this Dude geezer to see what he can do from the coaching position, because as we mentioned with Big, I don't know, 4, 5, 6, maybe even problems you can point at fairly quickly that could be the issues, and they need to isolate the issues now and get over them, because there's a good spree of tournaments coming up where they want to put in some good results, and there's a lot of prize money they can win, and obviously gearing up for the major towards the end of the year. You've already got to start thinking now, is this lineup going to survive to the major? Because if we don't, we axe the arm. If we're starting to get frostbite on the hands, if this player has a problem, we're going to axe the whole arm off now and get ready for the major. And that's what they need to be thinking about. So, Big, they were a bit disappointing, and good shit from Renegades anyway to actually take a series, because they had a bit of a dreadful time in Europe, to be honest. And I think, I won't go into the full details, but to my knowledge, they're kind of stuck in Europe at the moment, and because it's very hard to get flights and get back into Australia. So I'm not sure of their total situation. They might actually have sorted out getting home. So for them, there's a bit more concerns, I guess, than CS alone, potentially at the moment. But for them, at least they got something in the end out of their stay, I guess. And yeah, I mean, it's good alone to see a team like them actually getting over to Europe, but hopefully when the world calms down a bit, and hopefully Australia is a country that's pretty far along the vaccine route, they can get vaccinated, they can travel to some of these countries easier, and they can play, whatever they need a few months in Europe and get up to high level, because we know some of the players can do it. So yeah, I mean, we'll just sign off there with Renegades. Obviously, they took the series. You casted this series. Just from your perspective, was it good to see Renegades, putting in a good result after a bit of a dismal, few weeks, months in Europe?
Oh fuck yeah! I mean, I'm biased as hell because I wanted a good series, right? We actually we originally had OG Fun plus Phoenix, and I prepped for it, and I was like, oh, this is gonna bang. And then of course we got bumped onto it as with the C stream. We got bumped onto Big Renegades. And I'm incredibly biased because I've never casted Pro League before. I was like, I want a good series. I want something I can get hyped up about. I came off it and I was absolutely electric. I was bouncing off the fucking walls. I was like, that was a great series. We've done a great job casting it. It's fantastic. But it's also fantastic for them just to take something home. I think if they'd gone through and had this complete wash of a season, right, not taking a single map, not getting anything working, it would have been very easy just to go, well, shit, we're not on this level whatsoever. But I think beating a good team on a bad run is solid, regardless, right? You've still got to put them to bed. You've still got to beat those teams. And we saw Renegades pulling out some really strong stuff individually and some pretty nice set plays as a team to beat Big. So I was really impressed with what they brought, considering, they don't get to play this caliber of CS all that much. The Australian scene is not as developed as it is over in Europe or CIS or even NA. I mean, shit, look at Tier 2 NA at the moment. It's cracking. So yeah, I thought they were really solid across the board. I didn't have any complaints given the situation they're coming from.
Yeah, and to my knowledge, they're still practicing for a few weeks in Europe whilst they're still here. So just for them, can you imagine, if you did go 0-5, trying to get the actual motivation to practice and keep going? Because I'm guessing even from their perspective, this is with no inside information, but when you have a result like this, they might even already be calling the roster into question and saying, is this actually going to work? Can we even compete at this level? Do we need to go back to Australia and hook out, fish out a couple more players to try and round this out, because this might just not work? So at least just from that perspective, in terms of just stabilize and saying we can actually play at a really high level, that's a very good thing for them. And hopefully it helps them going into this practice period to actually get a lot of value out of it and be able to reflect on these games and think about what worked, what didn't, because that's a really good thing about this format, is they've got a good number of series, good number of games to look back at. Even though they're mostly 2-0s, they've still got 10 maps and whatever to go back through, which is a pretty good amount of data, especially if you've got a good spread of maps played. So good stuff from them. What we're going to talk about next is actually a surprise topic that you don't know is coming. I just wanted to throw you off with this one. And it is about OG, because OG, NBK came out of this, and there was some weird shit on Twitter where Alexi B went on HLTV Confirmed podcast, and then NBK tweeted, don't believe everything Alexi says, or something, on Twitter. This was a few days before he got announced as removed from the team. So he comes out, and then we're all sat here what does ISSAA need to do to get kicked? And then NiKo comes in as a stand-in for the Pro League group stages, and presumably NiKo is an option long-term. They might even be considering him right now. So when you first saw this roster move, were you as shocked as I am that it was NBK coming out and not an ISSAA coming out of this lineup?
What was the Thorin tweet? Why do teams keep kicking defenders for not scoring goals and then wondering why they're conceding so fucking many? That's what it is. You've kicked a player because statistically, sure, he's not the best player on that team, but you've kicked an anchor, you've kicked an experience, right? You've just kicked years of experience off that roster by getting rid of NBK. And you haven't really brought it back with NiKo. I can see arguments either way, but I was surprised. I think everyone was surprised, to be fair. I think ISSAA had made his bed.
He's probably more surprised than us, to be honest.
Exactly. Like, everyone's looking at it and just going, ISSAA's got to be gone. And then they kick NBK. But I don't know. I can see a world where it makes sense. I can see a world where it doesn't even remotely. At the moment, obviously, they're still plugging NiKo into NBK spots. So we can't really read anything at all into how they're going to use him. Maybe they're going to start changing things up. Maybe they're going to be switching roles around. We can't read anything into that because they just went, okay, NiKo play NBK spots. And he was all right. He did arguably what NBK does in those spots. He did the best he could do, given he's playing anchors, given he's playing shit spots, and given he's playing, as you say, in the corners of the map for information, right? That's the role that he's been assigned. So he does what he can. I just don't see necessarily how the synergy works with the 5 they've got now. I look across the lineup and I don't see a big anchor player anywhere. I don't see someone who I'm going, as you go with NBK, right? NBK whole B side does too. Fine. Sets himself up, anchors it down, gets 1, maybe 2 kills, stalls with utility, plays that spot incredibly well, even if, in other areas he's not looking as hot as he used to. I don't see that player on this roster at the moment. And I don't think that'll get found out yet. I think potentially we're going to see the problems 2, 3, 4 tournaments down the line where they actually start trying to change things. I mean, Rugger's a great coach, and if there's anyone who can convince someone to play the bitchy spots on the map, sure, it's him, but it's not going to be easy convincing any of these people. I wonder if maybe they go to ISSAA, in all honesty, and go, look, you're playing shit. You're not really playing the role, when you're not playing to the caliber we expect you to play to for the role that we're giving you and the space that we're giving you to play that. So we're going to let NiKo do that for a bit, and we're going to plug you into NBK's positions and see how you do with a more point your crosshair in this direction and kill as many people as you fucking can while calling it, right? Plug and play, switch it up a bit. I think that's the only thing they can do. In terms of NiKo staying, I mean, I think they have to give it a go. I don't think they would have brought him in if they were looking at a temp solution. It doesn't make any sense to me for you to kick right before coming into Pro League. I think you either kick him away before and get him gone, or you wait until Pro League's done. And I mean, as much as we bitch about teams bringing dead rosters in, just wait until Pro League's finished. You got a little bit of gap. Okay, now we'll get rid of someone, right? They're Group A. Just do it and then get rid of him. But yeah, I think they've brought NiKo in. They've got to be considering him as a long-term thing. And as much as I'll be interested to see where it goes, I'm kind of disappointed that they've picked the player who just is statistically worse to kick. It does feel like someone's just looked at the numbers at OG and gone, this player has the worst numbers, therefore he will go. And I think that might well come back to bite them in the arse in the long run.
Yeah, so from what I know, from reading some of the statements and hearing a little bit, it sounds like there was a leadership clash between NBK and Alexi B. That's kind of what I read from what I've seen. It definitely there was definitely, NBK said something like, something along the lines of they had their differences on where they thought the team should go moving forward, and it definitely sounds like NBK either wanted to call or wanted to have a lot of say in the calling or wanted to have a big switch up of the way they were playing or something along these lines. And we know in the past that NBK has been very vocal about saying, I want to call for this team. I don't think you can call in this scenario Shocks, for example. I don't think that Alex should be calling CT sides on Vitality, so they have a rift there. It's kind of the same storyline playing out again from what I can tell. And then whatever, this boils over too much, and then ISSAA ends up staying in. And from ISSAA's perspective, he might have even been like peddling that like NBK was like, this clash was worse than it is, to try and keep himself in the team and have sort of a scapegoat or some shit going on. Like, I wouldn't even be surprised. He just sat there saying, yeah, this, like whispering like Alexi B's ear, saying, you know that NBK guy, he thinks he can call better than you or something. Should get this NiKo guy in instead or some shit like this. And then I read some like hilarious thing that Alexi B said. You'll like this if you haven't seen it. He said something like, I think he said that ISSAA is a glue guy on LAN because he brings loads of hype. He's a massive hype man. You know, all of this sort of shit. He brings loads of energy. And I just read this. I was like, this is like the most biggest load of horse shit I've ever read. Like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Like, who cares that he's hype on LAN? And I was thinking, like, if you really want some hype on LAN, just hire like fucking Heaton to stand behind your team or something. Hire Jason Lake from one tournament to sit in front of you and scream. Like, who cares? Who cares if someone's super hyped up? And then the hilarious part is saying that ISSAA is a glue guy on LAN. He's going to hold this team together. What do you think NBK brings to a team? He is the literal definition of a glue guy in the fucking roles in the game. Outside of the game, he's played all these fucking tournaments. He's won majors. How could you have more of a glue? Oh, I'm just tilted as fuck. Like, how can you call ISSAA a glue guy when that is literally the definition of what NBK is? So, just ridiculous. Like... Just absolutely ridiculous. I couldn't believe it when I read that. I mean, to be fair to Alexi, he might have just said it like the heat of the moment, trying to defend ISSAA, but I mean, it's just not true at all. That ISSAA's some incredible glue guy. I mean, it might be playing on hyping and stuff, but as you said yourself, when you look at this lineup on paper, like, it just doesn't feel like it makes a lot of sense anymore, when for me it was the Alexi, NBK, Valde core that was the really strong part, and then it was Mantu. Maybe a little bit less so now, and ISSAA, they were the questionable parts. They're the parts you might have to move around and chop and change if you really want to push forward. But now it's like, it's basically on Valde to play incredibly well, and Alexi B to call an incredible game where you're just going to lose basically at the moment. And role-wise, I'm not sure it makes perfect sense. Presumably NiKo is playing a lot of rotator spots in the middle of the map on Heroic. That's what I saw with Borup being the anchor. And presumably, as you say, right now he's playing all of NBK's spot, which is the small site anchor, normally the B site on most maps. So probably that's a bit of a jarring thing for him, where that doesn't make perfect sense. Will he stay? Will he go? I don't know. You do have to keep in mind there are a lot of Danish options at the moment, with obviously North pulling out and all that. So maybe there are a few players you could consider. I'm not sure. But at this point, if I was the OG organisation, I'd be considering building a new Danish lineup around Valde and maybe have it call in English with Alexi B, or maybe just get rid of Alexi and bring in MSL, even though it might be a bit of a downgrade. Then we can have a full Danish lineup and try again, because yeah, I don't really see a way out of this. And it's just another one of those moves, taking out NBK in this situation, that screams to me of like, we need more higher ups over teams. We need more general managers to be the mediators in these discussions to sort out these problems, because we can't just have there be a rift and everything goes to shit instantly and people are coming out of the team and we're losing our good pieces, and we've got ISSAA staying and people saying he's a glue guy delusionally. Like, we can't have this anymore. We need to we need to sort this out. And as another example, I was speaking to someone about how Kassad came out of Cloud9, and it's exactly kind of the same discussion where there was a clash between Kassad and Alex, and it's just like, how can we not hold both these pieces in the team? Like, how does it just instantly fall in half? How can it not work? How can two people not have different perspectives on how the game is played, and still you can still function in a team? You just need to have some sort of mediator above them to sort this sort of problem out and have a defined hierarchy. Say it's always, you know, I don't know, in this case, it would Alexi B always has final say, but outside of the game, NBK, you can have a lot of say in what we practice in scrims, or you can, you know, have a lot of input in those discussions. There was a way out of this without removing an NBK, in my opinion. And yeah, from all angles, who knows what's going on there. So I thought I'd catch you off guard with that one.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Especially with the with the fucking glue guy line, which I've been saving that one up for a while to rant about that one. So I think we're staying on the depressing topics. We'll go into G2. But actually, I think so. They're actually 2-0. Are they not in Pro League right now? Oh, they literally just lost a game a few minutes ago to Ents.
They just lost.
who should be the worst team in that group, so that doesn't make any sense either. Like the rest of this CS online at the moment. So G2, they came out of Katowice. They had a couple good games, but overall still not of... I mean, when you build this lineup, this is like, we're really going for this. They were already, whatever, pre-NiKo top 6-ish team where they had potential to be top 5, and then you bring in NiKo and this is like, we're going to make a real challenge to be top 3. So even though in context of some of their recent results it might look okay, it still was nowhere near where this team is aiming for, and for an organisation of the calibre of G2 and probably the money they're spending, that was not good enough. So after these results, obviously it boils over, and the decision they come to is that kennyS, whatever issues he might be having, I know in the past he's a player with questionable motivation at times. Maybe that was a factor. I think I read through the statement when he got benched or whatever, and it was very, very vague. It was almost a positive indictment of someone you're benching, which is a bit unusual to say he's really great and then bench him. So obviously there's more going on than meets the eye, or they're telling us, but my guess would be motivation problems and this sort of stuff. Maybe, to be fair, maybe just as a person, this whole COVID situation is weighing a lot on him, so maybe you shouldn't bash on kennyS too hard. But when you saw this change, and obviously NiKo coming in as the AWPer temporarily and Jax coming back in the lineup, what did you really think when you saw this change for G2? I'm guessing you side towards we're getting in the territory of needing a change, but was this the change that you foresaw coming for the Frenchies over there?
I literally thought someone was going to grab a clip from the Semler episode where he talked about NiKo taking over teams. Because to me, that's what this reads left, right, and fucking center. I have ranted about this. I have raved about this. NiKo picking up a hybrid AWP rifle. Right, let's start at the fucking beginning. I don't mind them dropping Kenny. He's looked pretty awful so far. I think whichever roster picks him up and can afford to keep him for 2 years, they're playing the Kenny lottery and they will get their money back, no doubt. But G2 haven't got the time for that. They're paying too much money for that to happen. Fair enough. Let's get rid of Kenny. Pick up a fucking AWPer. What? How the fuck do you take one of the best riflers in the world, undoubtedly one of the best riflers in the world, put him into your system, give him all the space, all the opportunities, he starts playing amazingly. You look at other parts of your system that aren't working. Okay, the AWPer's not working. Surely G2's logic is go and get a fucking great AWPer. It's exactly what they did with NiKo. But no, what we're going to do is instead, we're going to move NiKo into a hybrid rifle AWP, whatever the fuck that means. That just means he can't pick up the AWP all the time, let's face it. And we're going to bring Jax back, a player who clearly we've said doesn't fit currently. You know, I mean, they spent what, a month playing with Amanek in, Jax out, Jax in, Amanek out. They worked and they worked and they worked, and they went, this is the system. This is what we want. We want Amanek in. Jax isn't playing to our system anymore. And you mean to tell me that NiKo switching to a hybrid rifle AWP, that suddenly works again? No. I just don't buy it. I don't buy it at fucking all. And I mean, so if we're really going to go into it, NiKo, he's looked better with the Krieg than he has with the AWP since he switched to this hybrid AWP rifle. It more sounds like hybrid AWP rifle is I'll take an AK or an AK with a scope on the top. Thank you. I'm not going to take an AWP. Because the one game he had an AWP, Harry and Hugo highlighted this, he was shit. He was bottom frag. It was Mirage, was it? I want to say Mirage against NIP. Yeah. 18 and 25 across 41 rounds. This is one of the best riflers in the world. That is unacceptably shit. So they ragged him. Understandably, they went off on him on the broadcast. They were like, you know, this is your AWPer hybrid rifle bollocks. This is your star player. This is unacceptable. And then loads of people started going on at Twitter about how he'd only just moved into the role, how you had to cut him all this slack, how you had to do this and that and the other. I think it was Legia who was going off. No, fuck that. He's just kicked Kenny to pick an AWP and he's having a shitter game with the AWP. I don't care if it's his second game in this roster. I don't care what the situation is. If he has a shit game with the AWP, you've got to call it. You call it as you see it as a caster, right? He's playing diabolically badly with the gun that he's just taken off. Admittedly, not currently, but previously one of the best AWPers, if not the best AWPer in the world. That's a storyline in and of itself. I could about lyrical on that for a full fucking best of 3 if I had to. So that was nonsense. G2 not picking up an AWPer, that's fucking nonsense. G2 pulling Jax back in and moving NiKo onto the AWP, that's nonsense. And now they seem to be going almost towards this liquid style thing of having 2 or 3 players who will pick up an AWP occasionally, but nobody will actually AWP, right? NiKo's going towards the Krieg more than he is the AWP half the time, and he's looking really fucking good with it as well. Surprise, surprise, best rifler in the world, and you give him a good rifle, he'll kill people. Then you've got Amanet picking up the AWP sometimes. Obviously, he's played secondary a lot with Kenny, so he knows what he's doing. He's a utility AWPer is what I think we call them these days. He's an AWPer. You put him in a spot, you put him on an angle, he'll get a kill. He can reset to a separate angle, he'll get another kill. It's not going to be flashy. It's not going to look pretty as it did with Kenny back in the day, but it will do the job. And, man, it just, this move pisses me off on so many different levels. And people want to defend it because it is this NiKo Hunter, you know, the cousins wrecking tier 1 CS storyline. In my mind,
who gives a
fuck? It's in my mind, it's unacceptable, and it's going to fail miserably in 3 to 6 months because teams will find this out. They will work out that NiKo is dropping to a Krieg more than he is an AWP, and they'll start abusing the shit out of that. I think you'll see AWPers like ZywOo, like Simple, put in a situation where they know statistically more often than not your hybrid AWP rifler isn't picking up an AWP. They'll start stomping because they'll be able to exploit opportunities. They'll be able to exploit picks. NiKo is not always going to have a Krieg in his hand, let alone on the CT side. And if you give the opportunity to exploit that kind of position to some of the best players in the world, they are going to abuse it to hell and back. And I think G2 in 3 months, 4 months, coaches are going to find it out. There's going to be gaps. There's going to be spots. There's going to be ways to outplay NiKo being awkward sometimes on this AWP. And that's when I think NiKo is going to start getting tilted again, right? He's gone to this big play. He's gone onto the hybrid AWP rifle. If you've now got 3-4 coaches in the top 10 teams in the world who are going, we are literally going to pick on you like you're the worst player in this team because we know your AWP is suspect on a map like Mirage. We know you can shut you down with utility. How long is it going to be before he starts getting pissed off? He starts dropping to rifles again. Then there's just not an AWP. And then Amanek has to fucking start AWPing to pick up the slack that NiKo's leaving. How long is it before the whole system falls apart just because G2 didn't want to go get another AWPer?
Yeah, I think... Yeah, I think for like in isolation, NiKo as an AWPer, I don't hate it that much. I think he can AWP fine. But the whole problem is, why have we got NiKo on the team? Well, we got him on the team to be a monster rotator player on a rifle that can drop onto an AWP sometimes, but in very rare scenarios. And this is not the whole point of NiKo, and now we've got NiKo as an AWPer, so we basically got the old G2, but now NiKo instead of kennyS. It just doesn't make any sense at all, and to my knowledge, with this team, the reason they went for Amanek over Jax, I believe, is because Jax's English is not perfect, I believe is the reason. So presumably that's an issue right now, because I'm guessing that he didn't think he was going to get back onto the roster, so he probably didn't bother learning that much English. Maybe he has, I don't know, but it's almost certain that whatever kept him from being on this lineup in the first place is still a problem. So bringing him back, although it might not be as damaging as bringing in a brand new player and having to adjust the whole system, it's definitely not just going to be a plug and play. It's going to be perfectly fine, even though they might have had a couple good series already with this lineup. And yeah, in terms of comparing them to a Team Liquid, who for a long time didn't have someone who was a dedicated AWPer, the difference was, and the reason that we couldn't criticize them as much, is because you had Nitro AWPing, at least during their best periods most of the time, and putting Nitro onto the AWP is perfectly fine because we've got good rotator players, we've got good anchors. Even if Nitro's not going to be one of the best AWPers in the world, he's going to be consistent, he's going to be decent, he's going to lock down the angles, and we're not losing a lot by taking him off a rifle onto an AWP. And that's the problem with this move, is we're losing a lot by taking NiKo out of his prime positions that he's played for the past, 5-6 years, and we're putting him onto an AWP in a scenario that doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, from their perspective, I have no idea what they're thinking in terms of how long we stick with this. Do we come out of it? It might have been a case that they wanted to get an AWPer and they couldn't break the right contracts. I don't know what the problem is, but for a team with their sort of budget, you'd assume that you assume that they could have broken a contract if they really wanted to make something happen. So that's a bit confusing. I don't know how long they've known about going in this direction and making this decision. If they had known for a while, then they really should have gotten AWPing in, or at least had a few people lined up, or at least said from the get-go that this is a temporary solution and we're looking at our options. And, you know, you could even like say in some tweet, like, if you're a good AWPer, fucking message us or something, because there will be AWPers, maybe someone North American or something that could fill this role that just doesn't know this opportunity exists. So there's all this sort of stuff that could be going on in there. I have had a think about who you get as an AWPer, and it's really not that easy in terms of who you'd get to replace a kennyS in this scenario. You might have been looking at somebody like an ACOR, but I'm willing to bet that ACOR doesn't come online that quickly in Mouse Sports. He takes some time, because I don't think he was terribly well-rounded when he was on Mad Lions, even though he had some good statistical kind of performances and some good series. I don't think he was that well-rounded, at least compared to what we need if we are really going for a top 5 sort of ranking as G2 here, or even remaining in a top 10, to be honest, considering their recent slumps. So you're probably not looking over there. If you could get someone like a Cirque, maybe go towards him. But with them bringing in Obo, they look pretty committed to me to having a lineup, and it doesn't look like they're going anywhere. So, and presumably Cirque's fairly happy with, in a normal period, living in North America and all that. So probably you can't get Cirque. And then after you go past those sort of names, I'm not sure who you look at, to be honest. From that point onwards, one name I could float is Nork, AWPer for NIP, someone that's come along a lot in the cast, whatever it's been now, year and 2 months. He's come along a lot as a player. So he would definitely be an option, and I'm willing to bet his English is pretty good, so he'd probably be all right. But outside of him, I mean, without ploughing through every fucking team, I can't think of any really brilliant options. Maybe you take a stab on Woxic, but we've seen that go wrong, and maybe they're not interested at all. So I don't know long term. Do they just stick with NiKo AWPing? But we've already talked about all the problems with that. So in terms of G2, unless they look towards a long-term solution or some miracle happens with NiKo AWPing, it just kind of a bit like OG, I guess. It just doesn't look like we're on a good trajectory here. And I'll mention it again, is getting to the period now where that major, which presumably will be on LAN, that a major is a caliber of tournament where you probably would bubble players and get them into a bubble and get it properly. Even if they're not playing in contact on the stage, you'd have them on a LAN server or something. I don't know exactly how you do it, but that's one that probably will be on LAN. Considering in other sports you can play LANs if you do get enough bubbling going on, or well, not it would be LAN in a real sport, but whatever. Fucking LAN, fucking Premier League, can you imagine? But you know what I'm saying. For all these teams, like, why would you really care about anything apart from the major? Of course, there's prize money and whatever exposure and all these other tournaments. But if I'm actually a real competitor, that's what I'm laser fucking focused on that major. And even now, thinking about, is this roster going to be good enough to compete for that major? And if it's not, let's chop and change and let's get ready for it. Because, you know, because everyone could be like fucking Flashpoint partner teams where, like, when the tournament's announced, you suddenly pick up a roster and you're like, this NV team might work, and it's fucking garbage, it's not going to do anything. So get your roster sorted now, 6 months or whatever before the major, and actually play yourself into good form, and don't be envy. There you go.
This is the thing. You want to be making those changes now, right?
Yes,
you've got
exactly.
time at the moment to build a team, to build an ethos, to build a system. If you make those changes and just sacrifice the next 2-3 months of tournaments, know they're going to be shit, take the flak on social media, and come at the major fucking hard. That is all anybody should be worried about. And to be fair, I think there are a lot of teams who are. Obviously, Vitality, which we're going to go on to in a minute, they're clearly fucking laser focused on the major. But before we do go on, I just want to fucking say, because it pisses me off so much. Right. If NiKo works, I will be the first to admit that is a miracle, and he is a fantastic player and he can make it happen and all of this. And I will be waxing lyrical on the Veto episode 27 about how great he is when we interview someone, right? Until then, as casters, we are going to rag on about it. We are going to pick the storyline that is the most hyped up, that brings the biggest thing to the broadcast, and we are not going to shut up about it until a player does something about it. And if you're going to cry about it on Twitter, go to Valorant, because that's what everyone fucking does, and I'm fucking fed up of it already, because it's starting to leak in from Valorant now. We're starting to see people going on Twitter and whining, and we are not going to get to the point in CS where we've got, people like Yinzu having to make apology videos because of something
that was gold.
about a fucking CS player. That is not going to happen, and I will not fucking apologize for an opinion I say while I'm trying to fucking get on with my casting and trying to bring the best broadcast I can to everyone who's watching, right? So let's just get that out there now. That is not fucking happening. Leave it out. And that's all I have to say on the matter, so we can go on to Vitality or whatever the fuck now.
I think it's much improved, this podcast, in the last 20 minutes. We just got pissed off about everything. Was that the Soulcast incident, that one?
So yes. it was Soulcast, Yinzu. Then there were a couple of others where people came on and started, talking shit and being like, I can't remember who the fuck it was, but someone was basically saying this team looked like they don't give a shit. Wait. Lost momentum. That's the phrase. We use the phrase lost momentum because we don't know what's going on the server, right? We have no idea at all. We don't know what's going on with you individually. We don't know what's going on in your head. We don't hear your comms. We have no idea. So lost momentum, I think it was Vince who tweeted this, is just a catch-all phrase. It's something is not working in that corner of the room. I have no idea what it is, but I need to mention it for the sake of the story of this game. And then someone who was playing in that game came out and went, "How dare you question us? We've not lost momentum. We've not lost interest. We're grinding our asses off." It's like, great. I have no fucking idea about any of that. I don't listen. I don't hear. I see nothing. So I'm going to make the best storyline I can. And it's the same thing with NiKo, right? Yes, it's his second series on the AWP. Yes, he hasn't had a lot of time to adjust. This is a top 5 rifler in the world. If you make as contentious a call as to drop him onto an AWP and drop kennyS, no matter what form he's in, it's kennyS. There's name value there. That's broadcast storylines right there. Even if NiKo has a blinder, you're immediately comparing him to, you're comparing him to peak kennyS, because that's what you do on a broadcast. You draw parallels and you make an interesting storyline. So it doesn't fucking matter that it's his second series. You've still got to call it out. And there's no point whining about it on Twitter either, because we have no idea what's going on behind the scenes. And it's impossible for us to know that. So we can't have any other opinion than what we see. And if what we see is NiKo having a shit game on an AWP, we're going to call NiKo having a shit game on an AWP. But yeah, that just it pisses me off to hell and back, as as broadcast talent, as someone who's trying to make it happen. It pisses me off, man.
I mean, I'll give you a list. So here are the top. Who are the AWPers from the top teams? It's Simple, Device, Jame, Fallen, Shiro, Zywoo, Dexter, Surson, and Poison, in that order. That's the top 9 teams. That's who we have to compare NiKo to if they want to be a top 10 team. I mean, it's indisputable. That's just the facts. So if someone's getting pissed off that you're saying NiKo's not as good as an AWPer as, I don't know, even someone like Dexter, for example, who we didn't know a lot about, fucking take your punches, mate. Like, if you want to be a top 10 team, you have to be competitive with Dexter on the server. It's just a reality. And all the the Valorant rubbish with players overreacting, like, a broadcast is entertainment, and people in CS or whatever esports don't seem to understand that bad publicity to an extent is good publicity. And if you're getting loads of engagements on Twitter because all of this sort of stuff, this helps you out and helps you negotiate better contracts with your organization and whatever, helps your impression numbers, whatever. So
exactly.
As long as
helps your impressions, just fucking lean into it.
Exactly. Just punch back. Just
take the clip of them saying, "Oh, this guy is," let's take a clip of Harry saying NiKo's not performing on an AWP. He then 30 bombs. That's a fucking montage.
Exactly.
That's get a million retweets.
That's good.
Just do it. That's gold. That's fucking brilliant for your social media team, and everyone will be lapping it up. It's the perfect way to play it. It's like Richard Lewis and the Call of Duty drama. He did a stream about it, and he was talking about they manufacture drama to bring impressions to a game that is otherwise quite boring. Just do that, for fuck's sake. Don't whine. Don't whinge. Use it to your advantage. That's all you got to do.
So you're saying we need some WWE hyping before these games?
It doesn't need to be that. It doesn't need to be that bad, obviously. But there's so much opportunity for something like that to be turned into this huge clickbaity thing for G2, throw up a montage on YouTube with, Harry's voice echoing in the background about how NiKo just isn't showing up on the AWP, and then have a montage of all his AWP kills with, some sick CSGO editor who's done it in Unreal Engine and all that funky frag montage shit. That'll pop off. Reddit will upvote that 20,000 times, and you'll get the best impressions you've had on your CSGO team this year. And it'll just be piss easy to do. You just do that, man. I mean, to be fair, as much as I'm bragging on about it, G2 didn't complain. It was Legia of Envy. So, it's a completely disconnected person. But honestly,
so Legia complained on behalf of
NiKo, for NiKo not showing up on an AWP on a map, yeah. And then, I think Richard Lewis literally replied to it and went, congratulations on going to Valorant. So, it's a whole thing. But, fuck. It's just G2, they're a very smart brand. They're a very smart social media team. They do some pretty cracking stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if in, 3 months someone's seen this and suddenly there is a montage with Harry's voice in the background going, NiKo's not showing up on the AWP, and then there's just fucking nutty kills across the board. It wouldn't surprise me. And they should do it. They absolutely should.
Yes. So in conclusion, we need weigh-ins in CS so that NiKo can have a scuffle with another pro. So let's just hit the final topic. I don't think it'll take us too long to cover this one. It was Nivera coming out of Vitality, and obviously, whatever it's been now, a month ago or something like that, we had the news from Valve that they're very against substitutes, and in terms of the RMR and the points and going into the major, realistically, if you're not playing with your full lineup for all the games, you need to be playing with your full lineup for a heavy number of the games at minimum. And unless it's a scenario where someone's, ill or something, or you really have sub in someone, you're probably not going to be using subs. So it's not really viable to have this player playing 3 maps. So presumably this is a very big reason in this decision. So talk me through it. What did you think of this decision to take Nivera out? And what does this actually say for the wider scene at the moment, moving away, I guess, from having subs and having more than a 5-man lineup?
It fucking sucks. Let's just put it out there. It fucking sucks. Vitality were the first team to do it right. They were the first team to do it properly. And off the back of it, we saw, Blast really innovating their broadcast around, swapping players in and out and the storylines behind it. We saw Na'Vi starting to do it properly. Obviously, Astralis are the outlier because they've just fucked it up from start to finish, so we'll ignore them. But you saw teams doing 6-man rosters properly, and it added to the broadcast. It added to the games. There was another storyline. There was another element. And it made the games more competitive as well because it gave you more room to manipulate players to go, okay, you don't have to learn this map anymore. Maybe, you're getting a bit burnt out with CS. You don't want to be, having a full 6 or 7 maps of knowledge. Okay, you drop out for Inferno, we'll bring Bit in or whatever, right? And it gave that ability to chop and change rosters. I mean, I think Vitality did it more than most because they'd swap one man out, then bring a different man back in, and they'd really fuck around with it. And it was great because it meant that they were unpredictable. It meant there was something different in every game. There was a key focal point that you could look at all of the time. And Valve, I mean, we've always known they were like this. They like 5 players in a server. They don't even fucking like, orgs being behind these players. They want 5 mates to turn up at the major and win it. They want them to all drive in their van with PCs in the back and turn up and set them up on the fucking stage and then win $1 million. It doesn't work like that. But anything they can do to make it closer to that, they probably are gonna. So they've obviously come out and said, 6-man rosters ain't gonna fucking happen, boys. Work out your shit. And then the only question was, who was it going to be? In my mind, we talk about teams looking to the major and looking to that date. If you're looking to that date and you're serious about it, you're not holding a 6-man roster anymore. You just aren't. It's not worth it. The player, the 6th player, whoever he may be, will know that this isn't a permanent thing, that this isn't a stable thing for him anymore because Valve have literally come out and told him to fuck off. So it was always going to happen. I think it's really unfortunate. And I think if Nivera doesn't get picked up pretty damn soon, it's going to be a tragedy because he's looked really damn solid for Vitality on the maps he's played on. And I think if any team give him an opportunity and give him some time to learn the full map pool of theirs, he would be an excellent addition. So I do feel really bad for him. I think he's a victim of the system more than he is, anything else. He's done nothing wrong to be put in that situation. He's just the system's fucked him. But I mean, fuck, we're talking about, G2. What do they do? Fuck it, pick Nivera up. See if that works. But yeah, there's not a lot you can say. It's shit, but it's Valve. And we always knew in the back of our minds, there was always a voice in the back of your head saying they like 5-man rosters. We've seen it with coaches. We've already seen it happen half a dozen times. When coaches came in and start taking away IGL's responsibilities, they went, no, we know likey that restricts what coaches can do. Now you're saying, okay, well, we're going to, rather than, the storyline of we're taking away IGL's responsibilities, we're going to take away players' responsibilities on maps by literally not playing them on certain maps. They were always not going to like it. It was just a question of how vicious they were going to be in their response to it. And, well, they've been pretty fucking vicious, haven't they?
Yeah, well, I'm reading through the statement right now. It's a bit vague, but it seems like he still is under contract for them. So it's not total release. It's more like now they've totally committed to the 5-man roster, which clearly is because now we're getting into, I'm guessing it'll be the RMR events that have to follow the Valve rules and whatever, and have the sub penalties and all that. So, and I believe some of them must be coming up soon. Even if I don't know, is Pro League actually one of them?
I don't think so. I don't think they've announced anything yet. Okay,
whatever. But they're in the works. That's all I'll say. In the near future, obviously winding up to the major soon enough. So yeah, I was disappointed to see this. I'm not at all surprised, particularly. I don't really see how you'd make it work if half the tournaments you play are the RMR events and half aren't. You're just going to get in a weird scenario where some players are having to practice extra maps, or they're getting swapped out for some maps, and it's just a mess. And from their perspective, and exactly the same story really from Astralis, it's just like, I mean, we yet to see Bubsky, the Bubsky situation work out either, but it just looks like let's just commit to a normal 5-man roster. It's just a headache, this problem. Maybe we'll have these players on contracts for the moment, just as like a raw backup in case we need it. But I'm guessing for Nivera, and obviously is the case for Bubsky, they're sort of really waiting for a decent buyout offer, and then they just let them go and whatever. And then if they really need a sub, you can just, whatever, there's a bazillion Danish players out of contracts at the moment, just get Cajun in for one event or whatever. So whatever. So yeah, I was disappointed. I think it sets a bad precedent, but we kind of knew this was going to happen in the first place from the Valve rules. So yeah, it's not that shocking. It's just a bit disappointing to see this actually happening, and obviously for Nivera himself, as kind of similar sort of scenario for Bubsky. As you said, it's kind of like what else could Nivera have done, considering he didn't get that much server time. He never got to play all the maps. How could he prove himself enough to be a full-time player? I don't think there's that much in it between Nivera and Masuta from seeing this team play quite a lot. So even for them, I can't imagine it was a totally cut and try decision. It was probably just that Masuta's been in the system longer. He plays more of the maps, so let's go in that direction. But for Nivera himself, I don't really know where he goes from here. I don't think G2 will be looking at him as a player. Who else is the friend? Heretics, I guess, would be the next French team in terms of the rankings, sort of. But what even do Heretics play in? I haven't seen them for ages, so I can't really remember what last time I saw Heretics play an event, to be honest. But they're definitely not of anything like the caliber of even, I don't know, a G2, for example. As much as we bash G2 still play all the events. So yeah, I don't know where Nivera goes from here. I hope, for his sake, that, to be honest, they just cut his contract. He gets out of the contract and he has a lot more options in terms of where he can go around. Presumably his English is okay, so maybe he'll look in that direction. But from one perspective, okay, yeah, he does get a lot of experience on a Vitality. It'll be invaluable for his career in the long run moving forward. But in terms of the short term, what does he do? What does he do? Does he maybe he'll get a couple events in odd scenarios where they need to give one player a break in the near future, but for his progression as a player, I mean, he's going to be essentially pausing his progression as a player now until he gets out of Vitality, or potentially long term, maybe after the major, Valve changes the rules a bit. I don't know what it'll be like long term, but for now, yeah, it's a bit sad to see Nivera essentially pushed away because of some arbitrary ruling that, do we really need it? No. So yeah, it's disappointing in that sense when you look at it from that perspective, I guess, that we just didn't really need this. And what is anybody gaining from this sort of decision apart from Vitality saving a bit of money, maybe? Like, what else do we actually get out of this?
There's no gain. It's not, the thing that strikes me about it is it's not as aggressive as when coaches were, because when I could understand what was happening with coaches, right? Coaches were allowed to talk whenever they wanted, and teams were dropping IGLs to pull riflers. I understand that, that really does go against what CS is, right? You've removed a core role, so shit, let's change that. Let's make things and then they got it back to normal. Dropping a player for a map is nowhere near as significant, right? You're probably looking at, if we're realistically looking at these, 6-man rosters, they're role swaps. You're bringing in someone with a bit more firepower for a certain map. You're bringing in someone who can play a particular spot very well for a certain map. But you're largely just rotating players depending on, the situation. You're not going to be completely changing the lookup of your team. You're not going to be taking away some of those fundamental roles. We're not going to see teams fucking subbing out their IGL because they want more firepower on certain maps. That would be, in my mind, that would be an, oh shit, we need to change something, right? If an IGL just goes, fuck it, this is Dust 2 or Vertigo, let's just sub in firepower. Let's just go firepower. Obviously, you guys have played with me enough. You know roughly what you're doing. Let's just see if this works. That would be an oh shit moment for me. But it just wasn't. And it is rough. I don't think we needed it. I think it was, with 6-mans working properly, it was adding to the scene rather than removing for it. And I think it's really unfortunate. I think we've lost something that, again, made us stand out a little bit more from the crowd, right? I mean, obviously there's loads of teams who use subs, but the way they were implemented, the way teams were using them was quite unique to CS. It wasn't like in Overwatch where you essentially, you can swap whole teams in and out because of role players and specifically people play specific characters. It was very almost like football, almost like rugby. It was man for man swaps depending on a situation, and that felt like it added a lot to the game. But obviously, Valve don't see it that way, and Valve are our overlords. They make the final call, so this is where we're at, and people have just got to get on with it, haven't they?
Yes. Thank you, Valve. Thank you, Valve. Our great overlords. I have my Valve shrine over there to pray to them. I need something, but yeah, we don't need to bash this topic too much further, because go and watch the first episode. I think it was the first one. We covered a lot of these topics and why it doesn't really make sense in the first place, and why Valve in the first place was leaning in this direction. I did just have a thought there of, could you actually sub coaches? And I think you probably can. I don't, because when you mentioned subbing out an in-game leader, I was like, could you just sub an in-game leader out and have them call from coach for a game if you really didn't want them playing in the server? I was like, I don't think there's actually anything stopping you from doing that, at least out of an RMR event. That would be hilarious. I mean, if some team wants to do that, I will pay them £4 just to see it happen. If fucking FaZe sub out Carrigan for Olofmeister for one game, so then he calls from coach, that would be absolutely hilarious, and I would pay good money to see such a spectacle. But I think we've covered all the topics. Yeah, whatever, chuck shit down in the comments if you want to see it covered next time. But I mean, presumably we'll do it in the next week or week after, but I'm guessing it'll just be Pro League groups, so that's all what's really happening at the moment. Hopefully there's another Clown Fiesta and some other teams who get some good topics to talk about. Any send-off words for this one, Wolfie? Got anything for the fans?
This will go out Tuesday, won't it? So go watch the C stream on Thursday. Come watch me cast Pro League.
Yeah. Do you get told you'll get? I mean, you don't have to reveal it, but do you get told your game in advance, or is it?
Well, no, not really. Have they even released the matchups that far ahead? They have.
Yeah,
right. We've got G2 Mouse Sports, FaZe, ENCE, Vitality, NiP. So the thing is with these is it really does depend how the groups shake down.
Yes.
Basically, what tends to happen is we'll get the game that means nothing in the context of the group, unless there is some really weird, funky, tie up. I think based on just team calibers alone, I'd be expecting to get FaZe, ENCE. But yeah, it really does depend. I mean, shit, you're looking at Group B. As much as I say we should get FaZe, ENCE, you've got G2 top of the board and Mouse Sports currently bottom. And they're playing in that group of 3 as well, so potentially that matchup.
I think all of the games have compelling, at least, storylines. If it's not a perfect game, you'll have enough to talk about. So, whatever stream he's on, C stream probably, go and just watch all the streams at the same time. Whatever,
yeah.
Give them the viewer numbers they need it. That will help them out. Everyone needs that. Right, I think we're done. So we covered all the topics. That's what I think. Good shit. Catch you all next time around.